and welcome to Macro Talk. Today we'll be discussing the economy of South America. We will be focusing on 5 countries that are the best indicators of the economy of South America as a whole: Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, and Peru. In each of these countries' economies, we'll focus on 5 major investment indicators: GDP, annual GDP growth rate, unemployment rate, interest rate, and inflation rate. Analysis of these indicators in each of these 5 countries will give you the best idea of why South America is the place to invest.
Argentina is one of South America's largest economies. Endowed with rich natural resources, the country also benefits from a well-educated workforce, an export-oriented agriculture sector, and a diversified industrial base. Although the agricultural sector represents less than 10% of the GDP, Argentina is one of the world's largest exporters of soybeans, wheat, and meat. The services sector accounts for over 60% of the GDP, supported by a growing number of financial and tourism enterprises. The industrial sector accounts for around 30% of GDP, including food processing, oil refining, machinery and equipment, textiles, chemicals, and petrochemicals. The GDP in December 2014 was $540 billion. The GDP annual growth rate is growing 2.3% each year. This is good for investors because each year Argentina is making more and more and increasing the standard of living of life. The unemployment right now is 6.6%. This is a very stable unemployment rate. It is not too high and not too low. This represents the majority of Argentinians are working and acquiring a good salary. Currently, the inflation rate is 14.5%, and it's trending on a decrease. Even though the inflation rate is high, because it's going low, that attracts investors. As the inflation rate decreases, it gets better. Right now, the interest rate is very high at 22.76%. Even though this is bad for the local economy because locals cannot, it is harder for them to buy money and invest in goods and services, it attracts foreign investors. The foreign investors can then put their money into Argentina and grow their money quickly.
Chile is a market-based economy that is known for its high level of foreign trade. In the early 20th century, the economy was mostly taken over by the production of copper, which was 15% of its GDP and over 40% of its total exports. During the early 1990s, the economy of Chile was booming, but then in 1998, it took a sharp decline. In the recent years, the GDP of Chile has increased and it's begun its recovery cycle. The GDP of Chile is $276.7 billion and it's on the rise. The GDP annual growth rate is 1.9% and it is continuing to increase over time as well. And the unemployment rate has dropped to 6.5% because of all the major foreign trade job opportunities that are there. The inflation rate is 4.6%, which is pretty good, seeing that it hit a sharp decline. In recent years, the inflation rate has been on the incline, but as of last year, the inflation rate is starting to go on a downward trend again, which is promising for the future of Chile. The interest rate is also on the rise, which is an extremely good thing for the exports and foreign trade that is occurring within the country of Chile.
One of the largest countries in South America, Colombia is endowed with significant natural resources. It has substantial oil reserves and is a major producer of gold, silver, emeralds, platinum, and coal. While coffee has been a mainstay of Colombia's export sector for nearly a century, the country is also a large oil producer, and its newly privatized coal industry remains a major exporter as well. Colombia's advantageous geographical location, facing both the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, has helped by providing low-cost sea access to North and South American markets. During the last decade, Colombia has achieved very strong macroeconomic performance, underpinned by solid institutional and policy frameworks, including its flexible exchange rate, inflation targeting regime, medium-term fiscal framework, and prudent debt management. All of these have helped reduce balance sheet vulnerabilities, while strong supervision and regulation have kept the financial system sound. As of late, Colombia's economy has been adversely affected by the global economic crisis, as weak external demand has led to contraction of exports and a considerable slowdown in economic activity. However, the country's very strong economic fundamentals have allowed the government to adopt prudently expansionary macroeconomic policies to support domestic demand and mitigate the impact of the crisis. Colombia's current GDP is $378 billion and trending upwards. The GDP annual growth rate is 3% and increasing. The unemployment rate is 9.1% and is on the higher side of unemployment, but is showing a decreasing trend in the long run. The inflation rate is currently 5.35% and trending upwards. However, not very quickly, so we can assume that it will stay fairly solid around between 5 to 6% in the long run. The interest rate is 4.75% and trending upwards in the long run, which is very enticing to foreign investors. Brazil is the largest and most populous country in South America. Endowed with rich natural resources, Brazil's economy outweighs that of all other South American countries, with large and well-developed agricultural, mining, manufacturing, and service sectors. Agriculture accounts for about 5% of Brazil's GDP and 35% of its export earnings. The country is the world's largest producer of sugarcane, coffee, and tropical fruits, and has the world's largest commercial cattle herd at 170 million head. Other important agricultural products include soybeans, corn, cotton, cocoa, tobacco, and forest products. Industry accounts for 1/3 of GDP, with well-diversified sectors ranging from automobiles, machinery and equipment, steel, textiles, cement, petrochemicals, and consumer durables. Contributing about 65% to GDP, Brazil's service sector is diverse and sophisticated, including telecommunications, banking, commerce, and computing. Brazil also has the largest rainforest in the world, located in the Amazon basin, and is one of the world's leading producers of hydroelectric power. Over the past decade, Brazil has built a strong macroeconomic framework, including fiscal discipline, inflation targeting, and the flexible exchange rate regime. While implementing reforms and prudent macroeconomic policies, the government has also moved to narrow gaps between the rich and the poor. GDP in December of 2014 was $2,346 billion. The GDP annual growth rate, however, is decreasing at a rate of 2.6% a year, which unfortunately is not that exciting for investors. However, with the Olympics coming up, the possibility for that GDP to spike is increasing rapidly. The unemployment rate, however, is 7.6%, and it's very stable, so that's very attractive to investors. The inflation rate is at 9.49%, which indicates that the government is trying to pump money back into the economy to help stimulate growth even more. The interest rate is currently at 14.25% and trending upwards, which is very attractive to foreign investors. As we see, as the interest rate rises, we see an increase in the viability of foreign investment.
In reality, Peru is like the nucleus of the cell. It has mineral resources and excellent fishing. There's nothing else you need in the economy. As you look at the GDP of Peru is at a staggering $202.9 billion. The GDP may not be the highest number out there, but we're going for quality over quantity in South America. In Peru, currently, the GDP annual growth rate is decreasing, but that is not stopping the actual GDP from increasing, apparently. The unemployment rate is at a stable 6.4%. And let me repeat, 6.4%. The inflation rate is on the upward rise, but in the last year it did decrease, so that could be the start of a downward trend in inflation. And finally, the interest rate. The interest rate has been increasing since July 1st, and it's been going up, up, and up. It is currently at 3.8%, and that is helping our mineral resources and our excellent fishing. So that is why Peru is awesome.